We can continue this idea of atomic mass whenever we have combinations of elements. There's most of the time in chemistry we're not talking about single elements. Instead, we're talking about combinations of multiple elements. And you see this whenever you have table salt. So this is what you have whenever you sprinkle salt on your food, is really sodium chloride. Now, sodium chloride is an Na and a Cl, or a sodium and a chlorine molecule. And if I want to know what the mass of 1 mole of this is, all I have to do is find the sum of each individual mass. So sodium has a mass of 23, and chlorine has a mass of 35.5. So if I want to know what the mass of the whole molecule is, I need to find the mass of the individual pieces. So when I find the mass of the individual pieces, add them together, that right there is the mass of the whole molecule. Sometimes this is referred to as the molar mass. Sometimes it's referred to as the gram formula mass. There's lots of names for this particular idea, but it's the idea that you have conservation of mass. So you can't take two things that are separate, add them together, and have them be a different mass than they were individually. So let's look at a couple of examples of this. The first one says, what is the molar mass of KBr? So the first thing that you would have to do is you would have to locate K and Br on your periodic table. And when you do, you get the atomic mass of them. So you look at this K and you say that there is one K, because there's only one of them. You would look at Br and you would say that there is one of them. Now you would plug in the atomic masses of these things. And depending on the precision of your chart, your numbers can slightly vary. But it's like 39.1 and 79.9. So now 1 times 39.1, 1 times 79.9, those numbers don't change, and now I add those two values together to get 119 even. This is what a potassium bromide tablet looks like. We will use those in labs later this year. So you can see they look like these little white pellets. It's very, very similar to salt. It's not something you can generally eat, but it has similar properties. So now it says, what is the gram formula mass of iron chloride? If you were to look at this, we'd start off with the idea that we have iron, and there is one iron, and the mass of iron is 55.84. And we have chlorine, and there are 3 chlorines, and each chlorine has a mass of about 35.45. So now this one's different. I'm going to have to multiply this out. I get the mass of iron to be 55.84. I get the mass of chlorine to be 106.36. I add those two values together, and when I do that, I get a value of 162.20. So it's the whole idea of find these on the periodic table, plug in the masses, plug in how many of them there are, multiply it out, and add them. Okay, so let's try it for one more. This one is one of the more complicated ones, so let's kind of walk through it. And this is ammonium phosphate. And this is what you have as ammonium phosphate crystal. And there's 4 different elements that are involved here. You have a nitrogen, you have a hydrogen, and you have a phosphorus, and you have an oxygen. Now the trick for this one is trying to figure out how many of each atom are present. Oxygen's pretty easy. It says O and there's a 4. So you have 4, oxygen has a mass of 16, oxygen is providing 64 grams per mole. Next you look at phosphorus. Phosphorus doesn't have a number there, so since there's no number there, you assume that it is 1. So you say 1 times the mass of phosphorus is 31, about 30.97, pretty close to 31, which is 30.97. Next, you have hydrogen. Now this is where it gets tricky. I have an NH4, which is an N and 4 H's, but I have 3 of them. So when you look at this thing in total, there are 12 hydrogens, all at 1.01. There are 3 nitrogens, all at 14.01. Multiply this out, you get something like 42.02, and this ends up being like 12.09 whenever you round. Take these things and add them all up, and you get 149.09. Finding the gram formula mass can be kind of tricky, and it takes a lot of practice, so you do have several examples that you can work through this on.